Okay, hey everyone, to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today I have a bit of a blast from the past for you guys from the brand Seiko. A little about them: they were founded back in 1881. They are Japanese in origin and now factories throughout Asia. They cover all market segments from entry-level to high-end, and Seiko 5 being their signature entry-level mechanical line. In terms of the type of watch, I'd consider this an everyday watch, definitely though with a diver aesthetic. Some key common characteristics and design language: when you're looking for something you can wear every day, of course you're just going to want that versatile blend of sporty and dressy attributes, in this case within the theme of a diver. Now, in terms of the model here, this is a long discontinued model from Seiko 5 Sports, the SNZH57, also lovingly nicknamed the 55 Fathoms, because 55 Fathoms is roughly 100 meters. So this once popular, now discontinued model with Blancpain 50 Fathoms like aesthetics often is modded into full-on 50 Fathoms homages with custom dial and strap swaps. I just wanted to definitely send a huge shout out to Artem Straps out of Adelaide, Australia, for inspiring this segment. So of course, with the recent release of the Blancpain Swatch group, Scuba 50 Fathoms and Bioceramic, of course there's been a lot of hubbub around this particular design aesthetic, and with that, of course, there's always going to be a bit of controversy, and I personally think it's a genius bit of marketing. But of course, as a wristwatch, I think something like this Seiko 5 will serve your wrist much better, versus I think as a collectible piece of merchandise marketing material, I think of course Swatch is the king from that perspective, and these collaborations are absolutely top tier. Unfortunately, those System 51 powered watches are hermetically sealed and thus essentially disposable, because the movements can't be serviced or even replaced without breaking the watch. So I definitely wanted to kind of share my idea in terms of another option, guys, and not to, again, to bash what the Swatch Group or Blancpain have done, more so to give you guys, my viewers, just a little affordable option in case you're early within your collecting journey and you're thinking, oh man, I love that look, but you know, do I really want to spend that type of money on something that if I wear it will deteriorate faster, or if I store to try to, you know, maintain, then essentially I'm just buying it as an investment. And if you're into watches for investments, you probably have better watches to start with in terms of trying to get those massive gains, right, if you're going to be trading as a commodity. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys, so as you can see, very, very handsome. I mean, there were actually other variations in terms of colors: blue dial, a black dial without gilt, another gilt model, but it had a gold-plated case and bracelet. So this particular option is one that I purchased way back when, in the beginning of my collecting kind of journey. And I mean, this was during a time when people were pretty blown away with the quality of Seiko 5 sports watches. And there's still plenty of people that are, even some of those older models that are still within, that aren't part of kind of the rebirth of Seiko 5 Sports, since they've updated the number 5 in their logo. Watches like this, some of them are still in production. So, even with these kind of older school non-hacking hand windable movements. So this originally retailed for around $300 MSRP, and could be had for closer to $150, guys. And then in terms of pre-owned, now these are going for closer to full retail or slightly above based on the condition. So it is kind of cool that these are rising within value in terms of just the collectability side of it, right? Not an investment, but again, something that is collectible. Now, it has a 41.8 millimeter diameter across, a 13.9 millimeter thick height there, with a 47.7 millimeter lug to lug. It's mostly polished, pretty much with just the tops of the lugs being brushed there, which is pretty nice. Decent transition you can see between brush and polishing. This isn't Zaratsu polishing, so there's plenty of distortion there, but again, it's really kind of outstanding, considering that, yeah, this is a watch that you could get, street price for, just a little over $100 in between. I I believe I got this one for around $120, $130, years and years ago. Now, the crystal is a curved hardlex mineral. So with the fact that it's mineral and hardlex, I know a lot of people get turned off by hardlex, but you know what? It's not just a typical mineral crystal. It's just not designated hard enough to be a sapphire. And these are all homegrown, of course, by Seiko. So they are fully vertically integrated, so they make everything down to the jewels and the lubricants, and they also created hardlex, which this material used to be on the Marine Master 300, which is a multiple $1,000 watch even when it was first released. So again, they believe clearly in these products, and with that, they never really had to put a lot of anti-reflective on these because they don't reflect very much, right? They don't have any milkiness there. It's a very, very clear viewing angle. Also more shatter resistant than sapphire, but also you're able to scratch them. But if you take a look at this, for such an old watch, you guys can see there's no scratches. And I'll tell you, I've never been able to scratch a hardlex. I've never tried to, right? But I will say that all my watches with hardlex crystals, they're not scratched for some crazy reasons. And I'm sure there's some people that can scratch the heck out of them, maybe within their daily use case. But for me, not an issue. And here's the proof in the pudding. A really old watch that was worn quite a bit earlier within my collecting journey that is now kind of static, just hanging out in another drawer. So the bezel, another amazing thing. So although it's not lumed, right, because this isn't a full-on diver, the bezel action is still 120 click. Unidirectional, so only goes in one direction. That has a hardlex insert. This thing has outstanding bezel action for such a cheap watch. I'm a big fan of finding that nice balance between smooth and clicky. And this was a very impressive watch, again, for the time when I started collecting. The crown is push-pull and unsigned, like you would expect. And the movement out back, guys, is going to be your standard automatic Seiko 7S36, which is non-hacking and non-hand windable, which is pretty unfortunate. So if you pull out the crown, the seconds hand just keeps running, as you can see. But hey, you can't have it all, especially at this price point. And you'd be surprised by how many luxury timepieces actually are non-hacking. Some very popular ones is the Moonwatch for a very long time until its most recent iteration. The Speedmaster Professional actually was using non-hacking movements. And then, of course, there's stuff from the Holy Trinity. Vacheron Constantin will sell you a watch that doesn't hack. So hey, I'll give Seiko a break on that one, especially considering this was sold during a time when much of the competition wasn't hacking either. Although a lot of Citizen variants did hand wind before they added the hacking feature. So this has a 41-hour power reserve, and you kind of get that from just wearing it or shaking it. Of course, 3 hertz beat rate, so 21,600 vibrations per hour. The case back, like I mentioned before, is a display back. And then in terms of the dial, it's quite nice, guys, with applied indices, which are polished, very nice. And there are even little lume plops there, very reminiscent to the way you would see them placed on, like, let's say a SARB 035 or 033, kind of on the inner portion. So very cool. Glossy black dial. There's a day and a date complication with the black wheels with the contrasting text, which I think looks great. It blends nicely. And then you get that beautiful framework there, also really handsome and well done. Polished gilt hands, which are also loomed, 100 meters or 10 bar of water resistance. Again, that is with the crown pushed in. If you have the crown pulled out, you are out of luck because water is going to get in there. But as long as the crown is pushed in, you really be good to go. And honestly, there was a time when watches with less water resistant than 100 meters were considered, professional dive watches. So, yeah, and also there was a time before screw down crowns were invented. So again, just something to consider when you're doing the math and looking at spec sheets and sizing them up. There's always additional context you should probably consider. Now, in terms of the lug width, 22 millimeter lugs, and it normally comes with a relatively hollow stainless steel bracelet. I have this one swapped out onto an Artem loopless sailcloth, which goes for $133. And yes, that's an expensive sailcloth, but it's also the best sailcloth you can buy, and honestly rivals the sailcloth strap you can get on an actual Blancpain. So very nice. If you guys are fans of this channel, you know I've sported this strap on quite a few models, and it's kind of cool to see it here, kind of completing that particular aesthetic of the 50 Fathoms. Now, this does have some add-ons that made it a little bit more expensive. $13 for the quick release spring bars, which are nice, especially if you have it on a sports watch versus a dedicated diver. For a dedicated diver, I would actually do just normal spring bars, so you save money, and then you just make sure you get the right spring bar that fits within here, that also has a fat enough tip for that ISO compliant diver. But in this case, since it's just a Seiko 5 model, I'm totally fine with the quick release and kind of prefer them. And then you also have the Omega style deployment buckle, which is a $68 add-on, so that brings us to $214. So again, not cheap, but man, it doesn't look cheap, doesn't feel cheap, so it probably shouldn't cost anything cheap. It is really, really handsome, beautifully designed, very nice and ergonomic. So with that, let's actually see how this piece wears on the wrist. Okay guys, check it out. And on my 7.5-inch wrist, this wears just beautifully. You guys can see really great case contours. They just wrap really well. I dig the aesthetic. And of course, if I get my wrist a bit too close to the lens, you're going to get a bit of perspective distortion. It's going to appear much larger than it is. So what I'll do is I'll keep my wrist nice and low, and then just kind of try to bring in the frame here. Oh, sorry, a little quick, so that you guys can get a detailed look, while just keeping a bit of a truer aspect ratio of how this might sit on your own wrist. And you guys can see really nice, really manageable with that 47.7 millimeter lug to lug. And it lays rather flat, and of course with those case contours, nice and rounded and highly polished to reflect off of your skin, it's going to appear a bit visually thinner. So quite nice there. And then of course the strap, my goodness, do I have to say anything about the strap? So it does have a nice bit of padding here, so you get a nice bit of structure to hold your automatic timepiece on the wrist. Of course, these can be a bit top heavy at times. This one isn't very top heavy, but the nice thing about a well-constructed strap is with that additional structure, it's going to be able to help you keep that watch nice and centered on your wrist, because you can't wind this, so you got to give it the little shimmy every once in a while, right? So yeah, with that, I think this is clearly a looker, and for good reason. And I'm glad that I chose to never modify this one, as I find it to be still quite attractive even in its base form. So yeah, I really do appreciate this one. But let's go ahead, get this one set up for some Lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Check that out, guys. So again, no Lume on the bezel pip, which is unfortunate, but you guys can see that Lume Bright on this Seiko 5 is still glowing away quite beautifully, even considering how small the actual Lume plops are. But those hands are really, really glowing. So this is going to glow like you would expect from a Seiko. Now, if it was a dedicated diver, of course, it would have been nice for it to have more Lume surface there, as well as it really needing a lumed pip. But considering what you'll be doing with this watch, I think you'll be fine to have it light up the way as it is, because again, it's more kind of in that everyday you know, kind of everyday space. But man, look at this in this transitional lighting. I always like to work these in because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, maybe just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. So maybe you include a bit of harsh lighting, which typically could expose any types of factory defects. But here you're just going to see a really well executed entry level wristwatch. So very cool. Maybe some smudges from me handling this one, but hopefully not too much dust on there from it sitting again in a drawer until just pretty recently. Thanks to the lovely marketing from the Swatch group, it did remind me of kind of the joy I felt from, you know, having some time with this particular design aesthetic. So, with all that said, guys, closing thoughts. On the wrist, this looks and feels way more premium than the cost would suggest, which is kind of typical for most entry-level Seiko watches. Very clean curves and well-proportioned case. It really just provides that balanced wear, which is enhanced, again, by that premium Artem strap. In terms of model variants, there was the non-gilt black dial SNZH57, the blue dial 53, and the fully gold tone with gilt dial 60. So when I say that, it's implying there's SNZH before it. Just I just didn't want to have to repeat that so many times and turn it into a tongue twister. Now, in terms of comparable models, now there are quite a few homage brands that do a similar kind of Seiko-based 50 Fathoms tribute. Most with better specs for a lot less money. Let's just get that out of the way. But many of those brands were also born from the popularity of this now forgotten Seiko 5 model and all of kind of the wonderful mods that were produced kind of within to honor and again pay homage to the 50 Fathoms. So bottom line here, no, this watch isn't exactly cheap, especially if you were to try to acquire one now. But if you're like me, maybe it's just kind of collecting dust somewhere and you might want to knock the dust off and go enjoy it. It's basically the best, you know, especially when you're pairing this strap to it, which is basically the best sailcloth strap on the market, you know, and it's priced accordingly. So yeah, it's not cheap. The watch isn't cheap. The strap isn't cheap. But with so many willing to pay $400 retail and up, considering, you know, there's a lot of flippers out there, for a plastic Swatch with a disposable movement, which at the end of the day, you know, may be highly collectible, yes, but it is more a piece of genius marketing memorabilia than it is a wristwatch, unfortunately. So yeah, you can wear it. You know, you can also wear a toy watch. So it's just one of those things. It's basically, you know, it's a toy, and this is an actual timepiece that you could wear, that you could service, that you could upgrade. Unfortunately, there will be no swapping out to sapphire for a Swatch because those crystals are glued in. They're not fitted in. It's just not the same. So no, this will never be a Blancpain. Yes, the Swatch is an authorized imitation, but an imitation nonetheless. So why not have, you know, or wear the 55 Fathoms with confidence, albeit at a much less hype-worthy, hashtag-laden affair. I think you can really get a lot of enjoyment from a piece like this. And again, it's mechanical and it's traditional mechanical. So it is something that will last pretty ever long. You know, even if you don't treat it extremely well, even if you don't wear it very often, even if you wear it more often, there are still all of those great avenues of keeping it going for you in terms of upgrading, replacing, replenishing, which is something that you can't really do with the Swatch Pawn or the Thrifty Fathoms, as some have really lovingly dubbed it. So with that said, let me know what you all think in the comments below. If you like the video, please hit like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.